Welcome to Building AI. I'm 𝗍𝗶𝗥, and in today's conversation, we will focus on one of the biggest challenges in enterprise AI. How do you innovate with data while at the same time you are protecting privacy? To help me answer this question, I have with me today Mario Scriminaci, Chief Product Officer at Mostly AI, who's actually spent over a decade of his career helping enterprises deploy AI and machine learning system that actually work in production. Mario is going to walk us through synthetic data, what it is synthetic data, why it matters for AI security, and how organization can actually use it to build a better AI system without at the same time compromising sensitive information. So Mario, first of all, thank you very much for joining.
Hi, David. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. It's going to be a pleasure.
So Mario, you have spent 15 plus years actually building a data system, but mostly AI actually focuses specifically on privacy preserving synthetic data. And I would like to ask you what first made you realize that data privacy wasn't just a compliance issue. This is something that we know actually quite a lot here in Europe, but was actually also a fundamental security challenge.
In my career, I always work with data. Any AI company out there use data of their customers to actually improve their models, to provide services, and to enhance the user experience. This is why data is so focused, is so important in any company out there, especially for AI companies. But we know what are the limitations of accessing data right now in different regulations. We know GDPR, we know CCPA in the US, and so on and so forth. And the reality, there were many solutions and many ways or workarounds to work with data in any case. There were companies I worked with that were ignoring what they were the procedures. And so exposing real data and real world data to anyone in the organization. And there were companies that were ideally stuck entirely because they were not able by the governance to access any data in production. And then there were the companies that were trying actually to fight and to do the right thing. So they were trying to apply classical anonymization techniques. And they had what we call the illusion of safety in this type of anonymization techniques. And finally, in the last years, it's been very clear the rise of AI-driven re-identification attacks. So it's very easy to defy any classical anonymization like pseudo-anonymization, masking, or generalization with very simple attacks that now are at the state of the art that make everyone exposed potentially to big risk, not only by sharing data inside the organization, but also outside. So the security challenge was not just a compliance task because no one was actually having one way of solving the problem. The ones that were kind of protective are not innovative enough, and the ones that are actually exposing too much are, of course, exposing themselves to bigger and big risk, and not only themselves, but also the data of the customers. And everyone that was in the middle was actually going to use classical techniques that are not secure. So this is the reason why it's not just compliance. This is a technical issue, is an AI issue, because AI can also help us solving the security, the problem, and the data access.
Okay, I can see for sure that the landscape, let's say, where we are operating, it's very rich, let's say. So you really have so many different kind of companies with different kind of issues, and they're also operating, again, you mentioned, for example, anonymization. They were trying to use some kind of solution compared to others, and how with AI now everything is much more complex, let's say. Now, I would like to ask you, because also you mentioned anonymization. Can you walk us through what synthetic data actually is? So for a technical person, again, that it's listening to us, let's say a CTO or a CISO, how should they think about synthetic data differently from anonymized or pseudonymized data that for information, as we all know, so also specifically indicated, for example, for data protection in the GDPR. But in this case, what's the difference again here between synthetic data with these other data protection techniques?
Let's start by stating the synthetic data is a fundamentally different class of the privacy protection with respect to everything else that we have there. It's not masking or transforming the data. It's not transforming and manipulating the data to be less re-identifiable. This is the classical, whatever we operate on the original data by making transformation, hashing, masking, generalization. Those are the classical techniques. Synthetic data is generating statistical similar data from scratch. So the key advantage of synthetic data is that you have a new data set that has zero overlaps with the real identities. So there is no possibility of re-identification whatsoever. You have to think synthetic data as a data twin, right? It behaves accurately, but is not identifiable. So what we do is that we train our machine learning autoregressive model, generative AI model, to learn from the statistical patterns and peculiarity of the original data set in a way that we guarantee privacy. So we can do it without overfitting, without memorization, and we guarantee even mathematically that we can go deeper to the mathematical aspects of differential privacy, so on and so forth. But we can guarantee that our model, generative AI model, will not learn from any individual out there. And it recreates then, once you have the model, synthetic subjects, so people with names, with their interaction, with transactions, if we are talking about banking, with medical history, if we are talking about healthcare, movements, if we are talking about telecommunications, so on and so forth, that is realistic, but it's not real. So the perspective from a CISO perspective is that instead of having the risk of misuse, right, of the data, or downstream data leaks or shadow IT data copying, so on and so forth, you protect the data at the source and you actually deliver inside the organization something that is safe for everyone. So it's privacy out of the box from the start of the pipeline, data pipeline.
Okay, so it really looks like that in this case with synthetic data, we are not playing, you are not playing a different game, but a completely different sport, actually. So it's really something completely different here, because again, you generate data that are not in any way related, again, specifically with the original one, or they're not, again, anonymized or similar. So it's really a different, completely different set. Okay, but then if we want to deep dive a little bit more on the technical aspect here, again, on the synthetic data and how they're used, this is something, again, pretty sure like a CTO, for example, would ask, can you train then a performance machine learning model entirely on synthetic data from scratch? If you can do it, what are the trade-offs, let's say here? What are the pros, the cons in doing something like that?
Of course you can. This is the main reason we started Mostly AI was for machine learning training and data analytics. And the classical setup that you can do is what we say, train synthetic, test real, to demonstrate that the synthetic data is a good source to train a machine learning model with respect to the original data. So the setup is the following. You take the original data, you split it in two. You have some of the data that you will use to train the synthetic data model, and some of the real data that you will use for validation at the end of the pipeline. Then you actually train the synthetic data, and with the synthetic data, you train your machine learning model, either a classification, prediction, whatever you want to train with the synthetic data. And then you actually, for the validation, use the real data that you put aside in the original split. With many of our customers, we prove that this is a pipeline that will not lose or lose very little performance in terms of accuracy. And the advantage is actually that most of the time, this process of generating synthetic data can be seen, since we are generalizing the patterns, we are not learning from the outliers and so on and so forth, like a generalization type of process. And the outcome is that while the most advanced algorithm perform on par, the more simple models like random forest, boost tree, and so on and so forth, actually most of the time perform better with the synthetic data and not with the original data, for the fact that the synthetic data is a better teacher for the simpler model to actually reduce the noise and all the information that is out there. So there are cases where we, of course, if you are really using a really advanced model, that we are on par on training with synthetic data, but the advantage is that you can actually use a simpler mode, improving the accuracy, and even working with other aspects that we are going to discuss later in the podcast, like rebalancing anomalies and so on and so forth. So the short answer is yes. The aha moment for our customers when they discover, yeah, actually our model is on par. And most of the time, the synthetic data actually enable to build models that were not possible even at the beginning. So most of the time, we're actually comparing ourselves not to a very high level accuracy for a machine learning model that is out there, but to nothing, right? So not only we can guarantee that the accuracy will be on par, but you can actually build much more models that otherwise you had no possibility to do.
Okay. Well, I have to be I want to be super transparent. For everything you're saying, it's really look too good to be true. So I want to play like the devil's advocate, let's say, for with a couple of questions. But jokes aside, are there limits? I mean, because again, with the short answer, you can train a performance ML model from scratch with synthetic data, with again everything you told us right now. But then playing a little bit the devil's advocate, I would like to ask you: is there an area, let's say, where synthetic data still struggle? I mean, based on your experience, is an area where you would say, okay, maybe this one is still not the area of synthetic data, or you have seen that there are no particular limitation, let's say, in this regard?
No, there are for sure limitations. One of the most common one is, of course, we need to learn the statistical patterns somehow, right? So the original data set cannot be few records. It cannot be something small, right? One of the expectations sometimes of our customers, the people that are using our platform online, is that by just providing 100 rows, we will be able to learn the patterns of the population, the distribution of the population. Definitely that is not the case. So if you really want to generate synthetic data that can really generalize and is privacy safe at the same time, you cannot do it with only a few value, a few rows, because otherwise you will either overfit the original data and that would be a privacy leak, or you will not have high accuracy. Okay, so this is the first constraint. You cannot start with a very small data set. You have to have a proper data set that statistically represent the population. This is the point, right? So that our model can actually learn. Then, of course, there are other situations. For example, right now, mostly I, for example, is focusing on tabular data and textual data. So in the moment you have a data set that represent a multimodal type of situation. So imagine that you have tabular and images, medical records, for example. You have information about the patients, and then you have a CT scan image or something like that. Right now, we are not covering that. So far as I know, there are no companies out there that can merge both. There are people that, of course, focusing on synthetic data for images, people that are focusing on tabular data, but no one that is doing the creation of synthetic data from real data in a multimodal scenario. Of course, we are working on that, no spoiler, but the solution is not out there. So this would be another limitation. And then, of course, every time that in the original data, there is some contextual information that is not in the data itself, because maybe it's depending on external dependencies. Thinking about, for example, scenarios where you might have, I don't know, marketing data and you don't have information about the marketing campaigns that you're doing. All the shifts that you can see in the original data are maybe sometimes inexplicable for the model that is trying to learn them. It cannot actually correlate what are the dependent variables that are actually creating the shift. And you will not be able to reproduce synthetic data with the same shifts because maybe you don't have the external information. So you have to have the contextual data together with the real data during the training of our GenAI model. So there are situations where synthetic data, of course, fails short in the sense that it cannot reproduce. At the end of the day, you cannot reproduce the accuracy that you need for the utilization. And those are kind of the main examples.
So like to summarize a little bit, let's say overstretch on one side, the multimodal and the correlation, let's say we can see these three.
And the dataset size.
Okay, and also the dataset size. So that's another element. So it is good, it's growing, but still, as for every technology, so there is still work to do. So that's actually the thing. Related actually to this in some way, again, to the technical challenges. Let's say if I'm using like a large language model like GPT, and I use it to generate synthetic data in relation to privacy risks. Am I just creating like privacy risk, putting again original data in an LLM like GPT to generate again the synthetic data? Am I just creating new privacy risks on one side? And that's the first thing. Let's say I will ask you this first question.
If you do it If you're doing it without the proper care, definitely you are. And the reason is simple. The LLM, given the amount of parameters at its disposal, is capable of overfitting information that you are providing it in even less than an epoch. Okay, so what is the scenario? Imagine that you have your customer data and you want, of course, you can use an LLM to generate synthetic data. You can even create, and we are using it in Mostly AI to create, for example, data from scratch. There are situations where customers don't have the source data and we use LLMs to generate data that resemble potentially the patterns of what the user is looking for from scratch. So you ask the LLM to try to generate for example, transaction and so on and so forth. There is a cost issue associated to it and scalability, but this is not the topic. In terms of privacy, of course, the moment you provide examples and provide a lot of examples to the LLM, either by providing it in with context, right? In the context window, right now, context windows can be huge, right? So you can actually fit an entire small data set in a context window and ask an LLM to generate data accordingly. Or either you fine tune the LLM, because this is the other opportunity, you have no control of the privacy aspect. So this is why in our platform, we allow to use LLM as base models, but we do it with the proper privacy mechanism. So we, for example, allow you to do fine tuning of an LLM with differential privacy. They will be sure that mathematically, from a mathematical point of view, you will not provide a record to the LLM enough to actually memorizing it. So long story short, you do it in a privacy safe manner. But if you go to the console ChatGPT, provide the data set, you fine tune it, in the output of the LLM, you will actually notice immediately that there are the records of the original data set, because you cannot control the training and you cannot control it in a privacy safe way. Okay, so it is possible to train an LLM to generate synthetic data from original data. You have to be careful. You have to be sure that you do it with the proper mechanism during the training. And afterwards, the question is, okay, how much will cost me in terms of generation? Because one of the aspects of having, there are many, there is not just Mostly I'm synthetic data model out there. There are others. They are specialized on this. They are much quicker. We are talking about 100 times quicker on generating synthetic data once the model has been trained, because of course the number of parameters is much smaller. We are talking our models, millions of parameters against billions of parameters. So you can understand the difference.
There is a difference, let's say, in size. That's
Yes.
for sure. That's for sure. Got it. What you just said actually in some way also summarized the general problem, let's say, in the entire AI infrastructure. I mean, balancing on one side, again, the efficiencies, the promises, the power that this kind of technology can provide it to you, but on the other side, actually doing it with the proper safeguards. So it's always the, let's say, the balance on how to do this in the proper way. And I guess we are still working on that actually. So that's in something ongoing. And actually, in relation to this one, I would like to ask you like a very direct question, again, a lot related, especially because, again, we are in Europe. And again, there is a lot about regulation, AI Act, GDPR, and so forth. To play, again, the devil's advocate, I would like to ask you this very directly. Considering everything that you do at Mostly AI with synthetic data, would you say that synthetic data is a real privacy solution, or in some way it's like a legal workaround, like a way to step outside, let's say, to step aside the scope of regulation like the GDPR? Because again, you don't have to do anonymization, pseudonymization. This is something that goes for personal data. Here you generate data. So are you trying like you found like a legal workaround to stay outside the scope of the regulation? What's your what?
It's not a workaround. It's actually privacy enhancement. And we are actually discussing, and not only us, but many our competitor friends in the segment with regulators to actually push to recognize synthetic data as a privacy preserving technique. Of course, there are many reasons why the discussion is still on, because has to be clear, not all synthetic data are privacy preserving. Right? There are many situations where there are companies that are generating synthetic data. They do not care about the privacy aspect. So if you are actually using the technologies, you will have synthetic data. Yes, they will look like and feel like the original one, but will not protect privacy. If you are doing an inference, membership inference attack or other inference attack, you will discover that there are data leaks, for example, out there. Synthetic data done the right way is perfectly fine with the privacy enhancement. It's actually a privacy enhancement technique. It complies with the GDPR because it's not personal by design. Okay, so we are generating data that is not attached anymore to anyone, and it goes actually below the law because minimize the risk by not just ticking all the boxes, it's minimizing the risk, right? So the GDPR, unfortunately, is been done with the right intention, but in terms of regulation, of course, it doesn't provide guidance to anyone out there that wants to understand. It's talking about minimizing the risk, but it's not providing solution to get to that point. So at the end of the day, the GDPR is a law that basically is telling, do whatever you can, and the moment I got you, I will go back and verify if you did enough to actually protect your customers. Okay, this is a classical loophole that in many regulation out there. So try to minimize the risk until something happened. You are okay. The moment something happened, I discover that you didn't do enough because now I know how the people actually attacked you, and now actually the things got out, you will get fined. So with something that put privacy at the beginning of the data pipeline, you are basically minimizing any risk out there by default at the beginning. So there is no way anything will be leaked. There is no way anything will be spilled out.
Got it. So for sure, you are, again, what you said before is very true. I mean, for example, with regulation like the GDPR, they are very good in doing this. But on the other side, in terms of practical application, really how to implement this, remember, because I saw this in the past with many companies, and so difficult really to say, okay, very nice, I need to act in a transparent way, for example, or I have to play fairness, but how do I effectively do this? And if I do it wrong, I don't know, there's been a control, an audit and something. So nobody taught me. So I'm trying basically to create my own rule in some way. And that's actually quite, let's say, quite an issue. Many are actually scared that this could happen also with the AI Act, for example. So that's
it will happen. Many will reinvent their own wheel, trying to find solutions. Everyone will find their own, right? And there will not be a standard way to actually tackle the problem. Companies in Europe should focus on innovation, should not focus on trying to understand what a regulation is actually wants them to do, right? So this is why having a solution that solves the problem at the source is kind of a way of democratizing data utilization in any organization out there.
Understood. So you are, let's say, eliminating in some way an element of great friction for companies, especially for those that want to start. So you're actually boosting them, really helping them to focus on what really matters for them. So as you said, innovation, it's a big topic, especially in this specific period of time. In relation to this, actually, that again we mentioned before, privacy protection, balance again with security. When you are working with synthetic data in real world situation, let's say in very specific and very delicate industries like finance, healthcare, how do you balance, let's say, between the privacy protection and the security, the integrity of the AI models in this case?
Generally speaking, the privacy utility trade-off is real. Okay, so it's there, you have to be aware of, but it's definitely manageable, right? There are, of course, many ways of assessing model quality and many ways of assessing model privacy. Of course, in the academia, in the community, there are many ways of trying to identify what are the best way of evaluating the quality, the best way of evaluating the privacy. At the end of the day, there are the kind of golden standard on evaluating accuracy. For example, we talk about how that at the beginning of the podcast, testing your downstream model with synthetic data and see how much you're losing or how much on par you are with the original score. So model quality assurance with downstream task testing. Fidelity scoring, for example, this is what we do out of the box with Mostly AI. You have a model QA report that tells how good the synthetic data reflect the original data and all the possible patterns, univariate, bivariate, trivariate distribution, correlations, and so on and so forth. And then privacy. Privacy, there is a lot around it. The golden standard for evaluating privacy, of course, are the membership inferring risk assessment type of tasks, but they're very expensive. Imagine that to evaluate a single synthetic data set with just 1,000 subjects originally, you could spend days to evaluate every single possible risk. So then there are the proxy measures like DCR and so on and so forth. So the trade-off is there. My perspective, I'm a CPO, I talk product, not only research, is that from a user perspective, you don't care, in the sense that the solution that you will find and that you will use will need to actually try to get the best accuracy possible without compromising the privacy in any case. So this is kind of how to manage the trade-off. Be sure that there is no risk for privacy, and then try to boost the accuracy as much as you can.
Okay, got it. And in this work, again, that you're doing, because you said working a lot with companies and enterprises, now I'm talking, and I'm, let's say, trying to extrapolate for your 15 plus years in AI, machine learning, data science, dealing with a lot of enterprises, again, with the work that you are doing as mostly AI and as a CPO. What is the biggest issue, the biggest misconception, let's say, in terms of synthetic data? So what do enterprises, company, they get wrong about synthetic data, about their implementation, that make them actually, let's say, think too long about it? So what do you see?
What we do in Mostly AI is generative AI, tabular synthetic data, trained from real data. And every time that we have to explain this, just you see the kind of the eyes going somewhere else.
They go nuts, really go nuts.
They go nuts. They don't understand what we're saying, because synthetic data is worldly recognized as a upper category, like a very large category. Sometimes synthetic equals to fake, equals to low quality in the minds of people. Even sometimes people that we are talking with, they say, oh, we are using synthetic data, and they're using the fake library. That is a library that allows you to create fake people in a random permutation of values about names, emails, and so on and so forth.
Okay.
This is the first problem. People experience synthetic data at the beginning with very low quality solution, and the first experience is a bad experience. So they say, okay, we already tried synthetic data. We took the first things that we found out there, and it didn't work for us. So the first was not to actually understanding what is the domain, understanding what are the real solutions, right? There is not just Mostly AI. There are many other companies that are doing that in a good way. But the problem is that it starts with the kind of experience. Okay, I give my internal to test synthetic data, try to get results. The results are poor. I ban synthetic data as a solution that I try that didn't work for me. And that is problem number one. The problem number two is that having a limited mindset on what you can use synthetic data for. If you start looking at synthetic data for model training, for example, that is how we'll use synthetic data. In reality, the moment you have a privacy-free, statistical representative population in your customer base, you can use it for testing, you can use it for sharing, you can use it for sandboxing, you can use it for analytics. So the first problem is that identifying synthetic data as a solution for a specific problem, and do not scale the use of synthetic data within other issues, other problems you have in the organization. But in our vision, everyone in the organization should be a data person, and everyone in the organization should have access to the data of the customers of that organization in order to be, I don't know, a data analyst, a data tester, someone that actually rely on data to provide value and to gather insight and information. So sometimes the reality check is that is either you tested in the wrong way for a specific purpose, it didn't work, you ban it, and you cross it out from you being used in the organization, or you kind of don't understand how to scale it. The reality is that the sooner you start using synthetic data, the better, right? Because it can be used during onboarding or prototyping of your infrastructure and so on and so forth, your application. And in many of the cases, not only for training machine learning model, but for testing, sharing, sandboxing, and so can reduce data access by months in any of those type of situations. So synthetic data is a solution for much larger problem that is actually the data problem in any organization out there, not a specific one.
Got it. Understood. And I can feel, let's say, from the tone of your voice speaking about it, that you have a lot of experience, let's say, with this kind of misconception, let's say, about data. For sure, the awareness and also the education, actually, what synthetic data are, how you can test them, and how to use them. So specifically, it's a lot to do. So really to educate and to show up really what synthetic data can do for enterprises and use them in the right way, as actually you were saying. Okay, now we are almost, let's say, we're really at the last part of our conversation, and I would like to let's set it up into, let's say, a couple of prediction. I don't remember who said once that prediction are the most difficult thing, especially when you have to predict the future, but we're gonna try it, let's say. But let's say this, let's play a game. If synthetic data, okay, based on everything you said so far about, again, the use of synthetic data, the cases, the pros, and some of the work still to do, if synthetic data would disappear tomorrow, okay, no more synthetic data, no way to really to generate them in any way, what parts of the AI infrastructure, in your experience, let's say, would really experience a severe regression or would even collapse, let's say? Had this happen?
Right now, there are many AI pipelines that are built on synthetic data outside from the production environments. Okay, so there are many situations when you already create pipelines that are in a fast access to data without any restriction because they're using synthetic data. So the first thing I will see collapsing are those AI pipelines that are built in environments that are not the production one. Okay, so anyone that is doing model development that doesn't have access to real data, anyone that is using synthetic data to even test models and evaluate models, because this is another possibility, those AI pipelines will collapse. That is the first thing. The second thing is that
testing and model evaluation, that's the first
model evaluation, model building and development as well.
Okay.
Then anything that is related to cross-border sharing. There are companies that, of course, right now, whenever you have, for example, a multi-country entity and you have to share data cross borders, this is actually problem is not possible under the current GDPR, for example, rules. So everything that is cross-border sharing will be blocked again by legal constraints. So anyone that is kind of operating in a multinational environment and actually, thanks to synthetic data, collecting the data in one place, creating models and then share back, that would be block immediately. So cross-border sharing will go back to year zero when, of course, it was blocked by any legal constraint. And then, of course, even not only the AI pipeline will collapse, but any other test environments, developers blocked by the lack of usable data for them, right? And that is another thing. So synthetic data right now is really the lubricant for any modern data infrastructure out there. And the moment they disappear, we will go back to the old use, the old problems. And yeah, that would be the things that will collapse first.
It's pretty scary, especially in relation to my next question, because I mean, I guess without the synthetic data, then we would need to use behavioral data, personal data, so to use them.
No data most of the time, right? Data. And so the solution would be going back at working with assumptions, data created by rules, for example, and they do not provide any valuable insights for models or for anyone that wants to actually understand what's going on. So that would be a step back. But the reality, David, there are many companies that are working in that scenario today because they are not using synthetic data. So they do not feel the evolution step, right? That actually other companies are actually taking and already using.
Understood. Actually, there are, let's say, in some way, other companies that are doing this willingly, so to speak. And then I go with my next question. Palantir style platforms. So they're built on this, this massive volume of real behavioral data. For those who do not know, I mean, Palantir was founded by Peter Thiel, so one of the two founder of PayPal with Elon Musk. Worked deeply with defense, and again, they really work in the platforms. They're built on massive volume of real behavioral data. And actually, on the other side, your approach is actually quite the opposite, because you have synthetic data, privacy first, and in this regard, I mean, you have like these two different areas. And is this just like a way to secure the future, so to speak, let's say, to have like a safer future, or is like a deep fundamental, like different worldview, different paradigm in seeing like the digital world and the AI revolution that you are experiencing?
They are two drastic different approaches. And I don't want to go political here, but imagine that we do a political analogy to this. It's like building a government that is posting camera everywhere, trying to follow everywhere, everyone, and so on and so forth to guarantee the security, right? So you build kind of a massive infrastructure, surveillance, governance to be sure that everything is safe, or you actually make everyone free access to the data without actually the surveillance that you have to guarantee that the governance is kept, because you have privacy first as a principle. This is the big difference. On one side, you are building like a big full data hoarding, surveillance, control, and everything. If you keep everything integer, if you keep everything intact, it will work. I'm not saying that there is no security there. On the other side, you are kind of constraining everyone to work in the same field, in the same environment, right? By liberating the data at the beginning, at the source, you give everyone the possibility to be creative, to do whatever they want, to use the environment they want without any constraint. It's not related to that, but there is a kind of a similar type of situation, the limitation that we are seeing with companies that are, by governance, avoiding the customers to use LLMs, so service like 𝗀𝗆 or ChatGPT. The moment you start talking with the employees, you discover that no matter the structure they create and everything, people are actually going against the rules to take the data out and be able to use ChatGPT for doing their work, 𝗀𝗆 to do their work. So there is always a limitation on the model of building this surveillance state to be sure that everything will be right, that people will, the moment they got stuck, they got frustrated, they will find solution themselves, right? So putting privacy at the beginning is a way of not having this type of issues. So you can do more actually with less, because there is less risk, less raw data, more agility. In the long term, you really have a privacy first infrastructure at the end of the day.
Got it. I remember I listened another a podcaster, a pretty famous one like Simon Sinek, talking about again the privacy first, privacy security that we are and that you are implementing here. He made like a comparison with cars. He said, I mean, we like fast cars, but we have speed limits and we have also seat belts. I mean, you can go wherever you want to go, but we still put some boundaries, let's say, in this one, in a way that you can kind of balance the fact that you want to go fast with the car, but on the other one, you do not want to kill or to risk really to kill yourself or someone with you. It might be a little bit silly, let's say, as a comparison in this case, but it's certainly a way to create a much more safer infrastructure. So that's actually the thing. But again, let's go again, let's say, on the topic of Europe regulations that we mentioned here, because some people are saying actually, we mentioned this, let's say this lightly, that there are some issues again with Europe regulation, with the AI regulation. Some people are even saying that it's killing innovation. But from your specific perspective, again, from the CPO of a company that is actually building synthetic data solution in Europe while the AI Act, for example, is being implemented, are this kind of regulation actually creating a competitive advantage for companies that get privacy, let's say, in the right way, or actually not? At the moment, how this is being, let's say, managed so far, it is actually more a burden than actually a competitive advantage.
Right now, of course, if I have to be honest, it's more a burden for everyone out there. We are seeing whatever is happening in the US, where the regulation is the keyword of many speeches and so on and so forth. But I have my own perspective on this. And I believe that regulation, if done right, regulation by any means is creating pressures to organizations trying to do the things in the right way. This is what a regulation should do. GDPR is there because it wants to protect our data. The AI Act is there because we want to have fairness. We don't want to have, we want to have transparency. We want to have explainability and so on and so forth. So it's on our advantage. But regulation can make pressure in the right direction and create diamonds, right? Or regulation can make pressure in different direction and create just chaos. This is the difference between a regulation that is done right and a regulation that is done wrong. So from our perspective, we believe that the AI Act, if followed by proper guidelines, and the same GDPR, if followed by proper guidelines, can be pressure that create diamonds and speed up innovation, speed up the way of using data, and keep everyone safe. So this is the reality. It's up to us to guide, not only to have those, the principle out there, and we have to respect it, we want to respect it, we believe in them. At the same time, we have to do our self-pressure to create proper guidelines that actually help the people to solve those problems. Otherwise, without the guidelines, people are lost, and the outcome is having processes that do not work, the solution that do not work, and at the end of the day, of course, you block innovation, but you also put at risk people asking for mortgages, people asking for credit cards, and so on and so forth. This is the reality. So regulation, if followed by proper guidelines, is pressure that can build diamonds, and we have to go in the right direction altogether, because otherwise it would just be chaos.
Understood. It really seems that at the moment the regulation, how it's been designed at the moment and implemented, is more like a compass. I mean, it can indicate the direction, but we are missing the map, let's say. So we have some pieces of the map, but still we don't know. I mean, we know we want to go to a certain direction, but what are the effective and practical steps to do this? It's still a work in progress, let's say. So that's what it seems. So, okay, well, Mario, we are basically at the end of this great conversation. Thank you very much. But I would like to ask you a question that I always ask to all of my guests, and it's always very interesting to see the different perspective. What's one belief that you hold about building AI and make it safe that actually most people at the moment they're pushing back on, but you actually still believe is actually true?
That there is no solution for privacy safe AI right now. I believe that is out there, and it is cost effective. Actually, we release our model open source, so that everyone, and our SDK open source, so everyone without even telling us can start using synthetic data by themselves, because it's a solution that is already there and is working. And there are many this is still something that will become better in the future. We will utilize whenever it will be ready, or anything related to that. But the reality, privacy and machine AI performance are not mutually exclusive. The solution is already available today, and it's available for free for everyone to use. So for me, this is the thing, right? We really want to change the mindset of people on using synthetic data, doing data democratization, doing right. And it's not something that you have to wait tomorrow. It's something that you could have done yesterday, and you are not still doing it. So this is the big misbelief that there is uncertainty. This is going to work, not work. You could use it today, and you could do it without any.
Well, Mario, thank you very much. This has been incredibly insightful. Thanks for walking us actually through the world of synthetic data, and also to show us how privacy on one side, but also AI innovation actually can work together. There is still some work to do, but again, there is a direction, let's say, at least. For listeners who want to learn more about Mario's work, you can find him on LinkedIn, Mario Scriminaci, or you can also check out Mostly AI platform. If you like this episode, please subscribe to Building AI and share it with others navigating AI infrastructure and security challenges. I'm 𝗍𝗫𝗏, and I will see you next time. Ciao!